Weybury Ridge. The banging and the screaming from the boot stopped, and now Alex could just hear road noise, the steady drone of travel. The night road was quiet, and there was nothing to interrupt his headlights cutting through the darkness. His grip on the steering wheel relaxed. His shirt was damp with sweat. He rolled down the window and took some deep breaths, exhaling slowly. His foot relaxed off the accelerator, and he began to feel back in control. Now he could think. He was driving west towards the coast. There was no major town between him and the long sand beach. He knew this road well. He knew every bend and every dip. He could visualize each lay-by and country lane from here to the open sea. He had just passed Aldborough and was approaching Stockbridge. Then he would continue through the sleepy village of Weybury and follow the winding road to the coast. The clouds had cleared, and now the half-moon moved smoothly across the sky like his headlights across the land. His mind wandered to the back of the car. What was he going to do with Jeannie? A torrent of anger rushed through him again as he thought about her. Damn it anyway, that stupid girl. She had brought this on herself. Damn it. The banging from the boot of the car started again, but without the screams of before, just a thudding, and then it stopped abruptly. She'll calm down in a few miles. She was probably sobbing to herself in the small darkness of the boot. Well, good, let her cry. What had she been thinking going to his house? He was on his way home just a few streets away when he saw her. He pulled over and she started shouting at him, and her voice rang loud around the quiet neighborhood. She was drunk. He tried to reason with her, but she spat at his face and started to slap and claw him. So he grabbed her by the arm and he slapped her hard across the face twice, first with his open palm and then with the back of his hand. Even though she was much smaller than him, she didn't fall. Her head just lolled to the side and some blood dripped from her mouth. He opened the passenger door of the car, but she started struggling, so he picked her up under his arm and threw her like a crash dummy into the boot of the car. And then she really started screaming. He got in the driver's seat. He threw the handbag into the back, and he sped away. He really should have seen something like this coming. He knew she was crazy when he handed in her first assignment. It was a rambling free verse tale of a little girl lost in the woods who was found by a woodcutter. The woodcutter took the little girl back to his cabin and made her his wife. There they remained, but as she grew, it became clear that he had damaged her so badly she would never bear children. Her sorrow was such that she would not talk or eat or let anything pass her lips, and so the woodcutter set about carving children from the trees in the forest. She looked after them like a real family, and with her family of wooden children, she at last began to know what happiness could be. Jeannie always had a gaunt and fractured look about her, but when she locked eyes with him, he found it very difficult to pull away. Right from the start, he viewed her with an uneasy combination of revulsion and lust. They didn't speak very much, and he purposefully kept her at arm's length, but when they made eye contact, she may as well have been grinding against him. From then on, her writing assignments became more sexual and even more bizarre. One described the physical sensation of an orgasm induced by the voice of a preacher delivering a fiery sermon. Another was a long poem in rhyming couplets about a pig farmer's wife who loved her animals, especially the big old boar. The wife would not give herself to the farmer, so he forced her to sleep in the sty and eat from the trough. Soon she gave birth to a litter of 12 tiny children with pigs' heads and trotters for feet. The farmer fattened and killed them all. In the lectures, she always sat near the back, and he tried his best not to catch her gaze, concentrating on his other students and feeling relief when she didn't attend. She started to drop by his office to discuss grades. It wasn't beauty, but it was a strange and discordant, lusting energy which emanated from her, a tension which needed to be resolved. He was thinking about her more and more. He knew it was only a matter of time. Even when lying in bed next to Alice, as she went through a list of chores that had to be fulfilled the next day, he would be fantasizing about her small mouth and her pale, skinny hands. Within 5 weeks of him reading her story about the Children of Wood, they were drunk in a grubby hotel room at 2 p.m. in a frenzy to get each other undressed. She started to scrape her nails down his chest and he grabbed her wrists hard. "Don't mark me," he said. She struggled then and he pinned her to the bed. She wrapped her legs around his waist. Jolts of lust shot through him. They writhed about in a violent hysteria, with her crying out obscenities and him commanding her to shut up, a cacophony of shrieks and shouts and moans before at last they lay side by side, taking in great gulps of musky, charged air. She said, "I respect your relationship with your wife." He said, "Don't you ever fucking mention my wife again." There was a small, narrow road, usually used by farm vehicles just after Weybury. It led to a clearing upon the brow of the dale, and there began a wood which stretched down to the coast. It was a peaceful spot, and that seemed like the place to do it, to take her out of the boot. He could see it now, miles from any houses, quiet in the moonlight. It was the spot where he had asked Alice to marry him 28 years before, on an autumn day when they brought an evening picnic of tapas and wine to see the sunset, and there, among the colours of the sky and the sun on the sea, he produced the ring. Before darkness had taken hold, she had conceived. The clock on the dashboard said 0:43. Alice would be asleep by now. She wasn't expecting him home tonight. He was going to surprise her, coming home a night early from the conference, and he was going to use tomorrow to fix the back wall like he'd been promising to do. And again his anger burst inside him and he gripped and slapped the steering wheel. Had he not decided to come home early, then what would have happened? He imagined Jeannie and his wife on the doorstep of his house. Jeannie in her short skirt and dirty mascara tears, and Alice in her nightgown, torn between shutting the door on this crazy teenager and taking her inside and telling her to calm down. Calm down. He concentrated hard. He thought about what he would say to her when he opened the boot. One approach was to threaten her. To tell her if he ever found she was trying to contact Alice again, he would finish what he had started and bury her where no one would find her. Or he could be gentle and apologize. He was sorry. He would hold her close and talk softly. He could tell her that despite himself, he had fallen in love with her and he was working on a way for them to be together. Both of these were lies. He could not imagine himself killing Jeannie any more than he could imagine being in a relationship with her, eating dinner with her, waking up in the morning with her, introducing her to friends, ringing her to say he was running late, but was there anything she wanted from the shop on the way home? The idea of it was ridiculous. In fact, it was easier to visualize his hands around her neck, squeezing too hard. When they were getting drunk together in the upstairs room of the Dockers Inn, he asked her, was she always attracted to much older men? To which she replied, "From the first time I saw you, I knew that there was something wrong. I just needed to find out what." She was drinking double tequilas and lager, and he was drinking pints of beer and shots of bourbon. The beer tasted gritty and smoky. Besides them, there were only 3 other drinkers in the bar, old men sitting by themselves, faces blotched and rugged, stinking and silent. She told him she was from South London. When he asked what made her come all the way up here, she replied, "London is a dangerous place." He didn't ask her about her past or her family. He really didn't want to get to know her at all. And when she spoke about herself, about her families, and about her medications, he didn't know how much to believe anyway. She rambled and wove her stories much like the way she wrote. He wanted to stop her talking about her past. He said, "Your stories are fantastic." She said, "Why don't you give me better grades then?" Her hand was on his thigh, moving upwards. "Because," he replied, "your punctuation and your grammar and your formatting are all terrible." I said, "Your stories are fantastic, not your writing. There are rules you must follow if you want to get the higher grades." She took her hand off his leg and picked up her glass. "I don't care about rules or grades or achieving. That's your side of things. That's academia. That's all suits and pleases and thank yous. You've such a dark twist to what you do in your stories. I'm surprised you haven't worked the devil into one of them." "The devil?" she screeched and laughed. "What an old-fashioned idea. Who is the devil? Why deal with the devil when you have a world of damaged people right in front of you?" He took a sharp turn off the main road. He hadn't passed a single car. He knew for certain that this quiet farm road would be deserted, and he needed time and space to talk with her. He needed to find a way to make her see that going to Alice wouldn't solve anything for anyone. As he approached the brow of the hill, he resolved that he would promise her anything she wanted, as long as she didn't try to contact Alice again. Already he was thinking of what he would say to Alice. "I got this crazy student." He'd paint her as a fantasist with a crush who made passes and who had gone off the handle when he told her there was no way. He was sure Alice would go for it. He was seeing a way past this situation now. Alice would believe him. This could all be handled. All he had to do was calm Jeannie down. He pulled up onto the grass clearing off the road and he stopped the engine. The night was still, and he could see the moon's reflection on the open sea in the distance. He was much calmer now than he was 20 minutes ago. He felt confident and in control, and he knew exactly what he was going to do. What he didn't know was that when he had struck Jeannie, her brain had rattled inside her skull. The blood vessels and membranes her medications were protecting were bruised, and when he threw her into the boot, her head had collided with the wheel arch. By the time he drove away from the streets of his home, her brain was bleeding, and as he drove and she screamed and writhed and beat her hands against the boot, she began to feel heavy and dizzy. On the winding road through Albury, she was drifting in and out of consciousness. The banging he heard as he approached Stockbridge was not her trying to get him to stop the car. It was a seizure which stretched and shook her and twisted her neck and forced her teeth like a clamp through her tongue. As the car rattled and rolled over the country roads, the pressure between her skull and brain built and built until a stroke paralyzed the nerves in her face and the left-hand side of her body, and now, upon the quiet clearing of Weybury Ridge, she lay in the cramped boot, drooling and blowing bubbles of blood, unable to move, crooked but conscious, unable to blink, looking into the darkness. Alex got out of the car. In the fresh night air, the treetops silhouetted sharply against the cloudless sky. At the bottom of the hill, he could see the reflection of the moonlight, and he stood a moment, breathed deeply, and steeled himself to reason with her, to persuade her that there was no need for her to take revenge on him, because revenge, she had decided, was her motive for going to the house. Revenge for using her, for taking advantage of her. Revenge for not taking her seriously. But he could talk her through. He was sure they could solve this. She was young. Maybe this was her first heartbreak, which is always a terrible thing. No wonder she wanted to hurt him, but she was young. "You are young," he would say. "You are young and your life will move quickly. I am old and my years are like bars in a cage around me, but you are still free, and life will move you beyond here if you let it. Move beyond this. Move beyond me. Let the momentum of your youth carry you. There is nothing holding you here. You are young." That was what he would say. Yes, he was sure they could figure this out, and he could go back to Alice and fix the back wall. There was a way through this for everyone. A fox passed through the clearing, nose to the ground, stopped for a second and looked at him, then silently disappeared back into the wood. Alex walked to the back of the car. He put the keys in the lock and he opened the boot.
Thank you very much.